Hello, I'm Greg Fenves, president of Emory University. Creativity is a cornerstone of our Emory community, and it's a uniting force of culture here in the arts capital of Atlanta. Whether you plan on majoring in the arts or simply appreciate the emotion, joy, and human connection they bring, you'll be inspired by today's conversation with three of our esteemed faculty members. Dr. Kevin Karns is an Associate Dean for the Arts and Director of the Emery Center for Creativity and Arts. Dr. Paul Basin serves as Director of Orchestral Studies, conducting the Emory University Symphony Orchestra. And January LaVoy is an Assistant Professor of Theater Studies who has acted in television, on and off Broadway productions, and more. Thank you for joining us.
All right, thank you, President Fenves, and a warm hello and welcome to our admitted students, families, greater community. We're so excited to be with you today on what I know will be an invigorating conversation on the arts and community. Now, to our admitted students, first of all, hearty congratulations, and please know we all share joy of your accomplishment. And we know that many of you have already said yes to Emery, and for that we say welcome to the family. And for those of you who are still trying to make that big decision, we're hoping that after today's session you'll be leaning in our direction. So to introduce myself, my name is Julianna Joss. I am originally from Anaheim, California, but I am joining you today from Wayanad, which is a district in rural South India. I graduated from the college in 2017, and I majored in political science and dance and movement studies. And then after I graduated, I had an opportunity unique to Emory graduates called the Bobby Jones Scholarship, and I earned my master's in sustainable development in Scotland. And now for the past 2 years with a international development NGO, I've been working with smallholder farmers, ensuring how organic farming can be a source of sustainable livelihood generation. And so whilst I know it's such a shame that you can't all be together on campus, personally, I'm very grateful that an alumna like myself can join you from this corner of the world. Now, before we get into our panel, I just have a few housekeeping notes. So the first is, it was great seeing some of the chat entries coming in about where you're joining us, but for now the chat has been turned off and you all are muted. But we still encourage participation, you're still part of the conversation, and we encourage you to submit your questions through the Q&A feature, and we'll do our best to get to as many questions as possible. And then at the end of the session, as we're wrapping up, we'll turn the chat back on so you can, say your thank yous and goodbyes. But with all that being said, let's get into it. The main event when you came for an incredible panel. And so as President Fenves mentioned, we have 3 wonderful panelists, and let me tell you, it would be impossible for me to cover the entirety of their very impressive bios, but I will give you the highlights. So first of all, we have Dr. Kevin Karns. As Associate Dean for the Arts at Emory and Professor of Music, Dr. Karns' goal is to build arts programs that span across the university and into the wider Atlanta community. Some examples are he is the co-director of the Emory Arts and Social Justice Fellows Program. He is the faculty co-lead for Science Gallery Atlanta, and he is the director of Emory's Center for Creativity and the Arts. Now, I'd also like to point out that Dr. Karns really embodies the interdisciplinary, multifaceted nature of many scholars in our community. He has Bachelor of Science degree in mathematics and management from MIT, a master's in trombone performance, and a PhD in musicology. Next, we have Dr. Paul Basin. So Dr. Basin is described as, actually by our very own Dr. Kevin Karns as, and I quote, the dream director of orchestral studies. So Dr. Bhasin directs the Emory University Symphony Orchestra, as well as the Emory Youth Symphony. He is an accomplished trumpeter, and in 1998, he won the Yamaha Young Performing Artist Competition. His influence spans across the globe, and he has directed ensembles across North America and abroad who have performed in venues like the Kennedy Center. He has also composed orchestral works for various films, including award-winning works that have been aimed at the Los Angeles, Berlin, and Nashville International Black Film Festivals, among many others. He holds a Doctor of Musical Arts from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Finally, we have Professor January LaVoy. Now, some of you might recognize Professor LaVoy because she played the role of Noelle Ortiz on the longtime ABC daytime drama, One Life to Live. As President Benves mentioned, Professor LaVoy has performed on and off Broadway, in addition to many other staged and primetime television credits. Professor LaVoy is also a renowned voice actor, voicing campaigns, documentaries, podcasts, and audiobooks. In fact, she was the 2013 Audiobook Narrator of the Year, named by Publishers Weekly. And most recently, she shares a 2021 Grammy nomination Meryl Streep for the Charlotte's Web audiobook, in which Professor LaVoy plays the title role of Charlotte. So some of you might also recognize that award-winning voice. Professor LaVoy has an MFA in acting from Denver's National Theater Conservatory, and she is also the incoming co-artistic director of Theater Emery. I know, right? I personally was blown away reading about and learning about our panelists. And what stood out to me is that you see that not only are they passionate, talented educators, but they're all accomplished artistic professionals in their own right. And I'm excited to learn from them today. And then maybe some of you will get to learn from them in a more direct personal setting if you come to Emory. So let's get into our first question. My first question for all of you is, could you each share the path that led you to pursuing the arts and how that path ultimately led you to Emory? And I'd say we go in reverse order from how I gave the intros, and we'll start with Professor LaVoy and go from there. So with that, I'm going to hand over the virtual microphone.
Thank you so much, Juliana. Those intros were so lovely and flattering. My path to the arts and then what led me to Emory, is that the, okay. So speaking of college admissions, much to my parents' chagrin, I got to college and declared nothing but a theater major because my philosophy was if I didn't have anything to fall back on, I couldn't fall back. Didn't prevent me from becoming a very talented waitress, nanny, personal assistant, cater waiter, you name it, et cetera, et cetera. But I moved to New York City right out of undergrad and was very, very scared and realized that I needed more training. And so then I went to graduate school. And after 3 years of graduate school and 4 years of college, my mother said, you could have been a doctor, but we're not going there anymore, Mom. I'm an actor now. And so then I moved to New York and I had a wonderful 20-year career in New York City, doing television and theater and film and voiceover and all kinds of wonderful world premieres and worked with all kinds of thrilling people. And then realized at a certain point that I wanted to do more to infuse the world that I worked in with my experiences and optimism in a way that I didn't necessarily feel I could do on a large scale as a performer only. So I needed to find a place, but I didn't want to leave performance. It was really important to me. I couldn't bear the thought of ending my professional career. And so when this job posting came up, this opportunity, which was passed along to me by another fabulous, dynamic Atlanta artist, Susan Booth, the artistic director of the Alliance Theater, I thought, wow, that's it. That's it. I can go and I can teach and I can be in the #1 city in America after Los Angeles, which is just whatever, but the number 2, but number 1 city for doing film and television. We've leaped right over New York. This is the number 1 city for that. So when the job came up, I applied and here I am, and it's been an absolute dream to have this kind of interface and access to young artists, my students, my colleagues, the city of Atlanta. It's been more than I ever even hoped it could be.
Wonderful. I'll only add to what Professor LaVoy says that, like her, my parents were also a bit stunned and also shocked and dismayed when I said I wanted to be a musician. And they were immigrants from other countries. And when I told them I wanted to be a musician, I think they said to me that the only thing that they could think that might be, even more prosperous and stable than being a musician was being a shepherd. So I decided at that moment that I needed to make sure that I also pursued a comprehensive education and not just focusing primarily on my music performance aspirations, but like so many families and students here tonight, trying to find that balance was something that really fascinated me when I was younger, and it continued to fascinate me throughout my professional performing career as an orchestral trumpeter, and then eventually as a conductor. And as far as my journey, I would say that after receiving training from large schools of music at large research universities in the Midwest, and then eventually making my way into the academic arena, the thing that made me fall in love with university life is that in our society, it's been my experience that the university system in many ways is the last great system of arts patronage, in the sense that the university system, especially Emory, I've found here in Atlanta, just like Professor LaVoy mentioned, they're sort of unshackled and free here at Emory, and they allow students and faculty to really be experimental, to take risks, and to undertake special projects with tremendous support, with tremendous momentum. And I would say that as a performer, as a creator, it's been a dream for me, transitioning from purely a professional performing life to ultimately a sort of more diverse portfolio of performing and academic work. And also my love of teaching is really what sustains me and what brought me to where I am now. And you'll hear all of us talk about the great Emory students, but they're really the sort of hallmark and the greatest treat of what I get to do here. So very happy to be here.
Yeah, and so my path was, as Julianna mentioned at the beginning, rather circuitous to music and to the arts as a profession. When I was in high school, I was one of these students who really kind of liked almost everything. Almost everything. I did not like chemistry. I will admit that. But I played trombone passionately. Played in all-state, multiple years. State competition. All that stuff. Really identified as a trombone player. But I also love math. And I love the sciences. I like the humanities. Okay. I'm a historian now, so go figure. But I said circuitous. I knew I wanted to major in math when I went to college, and I got into MIT, which at that time, which was quite a while ago, I don't know math rankings anymore, but they were very, very highly ranked in math. And I just kind of figured that my university experience would be sort of like what I had in high school, where I could really focus on math, but do a whole bunch of other stuff too, in deeply meaningful ways. And what I found when I got there was that it was actually kind of tough in that environment. You could double major between the sciences, okay. The humanities programs weren't particularly well developed. There was some great music to be had because of the school's location in Boston and connections to New England Conservatory and so forth, but you really couldn't double major in music and something else. So I kept my math major, but I really became sort of a closet music major, music double major on the side. I spent probably more time in the practice room, mostly after 10 p.m., than I spent on my problem sets in my math classes. I did pick up a management degree along the way, which was at that time, kind of verging into a humanities sort of an area for that institution. But when I finished it all, I felt that it was something I just had to do, just to go explore music, be a musician full time, see if that's where it went. I went to a master's degree program to study with a teacher that I really admired. I completely loved it. At the same time, I spent 2 years in that program. And at the same time, I kind of felt, as much as I loved performing, this kind of call back to academic work, and decided I was going to go explore music history, did a musicology degree at Brandeis, and have really not looked back. I really feel like in this space, I can engage with the arts, I can engage with the humanities. I don't do much math anymore, except computing tips and so forth. But I really felt that, for my 30-year-old self, as opposed to my 20-year-old self, that really was kind of covering everything. And I've been very happy doing what I'm doing. And I would say that what drew me to Emory was really just Emory itself. The ways that the university has and continues to invest in the arts, and the ways in which the university and the college in particular is deeply invested in making artistic study something which is truly accessible to all students, regardless of what other kinds of interests that they have. Most of our majors, I think it's fair to say, in the arts do major in other fields, sometimes fields which this would have been a dream of mine when I was 18, math and music, say, or chemistry and business. And it's just the combinations are really limitless. And I really love that, having been one of those students who deeply loved engaging in the arts, but also loved other areas of study, and felt very frustrated in college about how difficult that was in some environments. I love that I can teach and be a part of an academic community where this kind of cross-disciplinary, multidisciplinary study is not only we don't just have structures that let you do it, but we have structures that help you do it really, really well, and that really make your life as a student here such that really any one of these sorts of paths you want to take are totally available to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And hearing all of you talk, this was also my experience as a student. I remember, being in a lot of the shoes of the admitted students and thinking, do I pursue an academic pursuit? But if I do that, I can't dance anymore, but I didn't want to go to a dance conservatory. And then along came Emory University, and I was able to do both with, an equal amount of rigor and authenticity, and was supported by faculty in both areas to do both. And I know all of you kind of touched on this in your answer, but I want to dig in a little bit more. How would you describe Emory's arts community, and what makes it? So anyone can start. Any volunteers? Dr. Bhasin?
Well, I think it's such an important question today, and I don't want to give away too much too soon in our open discussion here. But what I would say is that Emory's arts community, from where I sit in the music performance side of things, I would say that it's inclusive, it's supportive, it's also very rigorous. But aside from those three descriptors, I'd also say that Emory is flexible and adaptable and dynamic. It's changing, and it's embracing change as we sort of stand on the front lines of all of these change-making forces in Atlanta specifically, whether it's socially or demographically or even in terms of the creation of art. I feel like we're standing right there on the front of these of these processes, of these changes. And so for me, when I look at the work the students are doing, the faculty are doing, I think about how the kinds of students and faculty that are drawn here, as you've already heard, are people who are looking to create, people who are looking to take risks, and most importantly, I think people who are looking for an authentically liberal arts experience that doesn't compromise on quality, depth, and just excellence of fine and performing arts.
Yeah, I'll jump in too and just say it's an interesting challenge coming from a city like New York, which I still love and will always love. But especially as a theater practitioner, that's considered, you know, New York and London are sort of the center of the theater universe, you know, in the West. And what's been fascinating to me in terms of the sort of question of why Emory is that the sort of ethos of a city like New York, and I think this infuses its educational institutions, in my experience, is we are it. We do the thing. Look to us for the thing, which in some ways, perhaps counterintuitively, can squash invention, can squash experimentation, can force people to see a sort of pyramid structure in which they're at the bottom and the things that are happening in the elite part are sort of at the top. And what I see at Emory is that the spirit of a growing city, a very conscious, hardworking city that is very engaged with its entire citizenry, its whole history, a plethora of educational institutions, culture, music, art, etc. It's very freeing and it's very supportive in a way that I would venture to say some places that might seem like a more intuitive place to go and study theater are not. I'm someone who chose to get my master's degree in Denver. I was living in New York at the time. I was working, and I decided to leave that environment and go somewhere where I knew I would be fed culturally by the environment, by, you know, all the things that were going to be around me, the new experiences, because I didn't just want to replicate the thing that was already considered to be the art. I wanted to be someone who helped make and change the art. And I feel that so strongly on our campus. I feel it from our students, our faculty. It's just really a part of the ethos of the university. And it's an incredible environment to be an artist in.
Yeah, I would say that, you know, in my experience, it really very resonates with everything that Professor LaVoy just mentioned and Dr. Bhasin. You know, I might just add briefly that I mentioned that Emory is really investing in the arts at this moment. And, you know, I think that one of the key ways that we're investing in the arts, I guess two key ways that we're investing in the arts right now. I think we're really investing a lot of energy and other resources into thinking about ways of creating art on campus that really gets us asking very serious questions. Not only about the arts themselves, but about our society at large and the world we're living in and the world that we want to be creating as we move through college and beyond. We're investing in artistic projects that help us to look at the world in new ways and that inspire us to look at the world in new ways and to engage the world in new ways. And the other thing that I would say about where we're thinking about the arts right now is we're also thinking about ways of bringing the arts into the experience, making the arts something that shapes the experience of every student across our campus. Whether you're a musician, whether you are a dancer, whether you don't consider yourself an artist at all. You might consider yourself a hardcore biology major, but we're gonna try to find a way. I'm gonna try to find a way, the best way that I can, to make sure that you don't leave here after 4 years without having some meaningful engagement with the artistic community on campus and the artistic community of our city of Atlanta. I believe very, very strongly, very deeply, that the arts are such a key portion of what makes Atlanta the city that it is. I think that the arts are something that make Emory the place that it is, increasingly so year over year. And the connection between the two, forging deeper, more creative, more questioning and searching connections between the two through the medium of the arts is just tremendously exciting and inspiring to me.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And I know that all of you kind of also touched on this about, you know, where Emory is situated in the city of Atlanta. And, you know, for me, coming from Southern California, I hadn't been to Atlanta previously. I hadn't really thought about it too much. I know that in recent years, it's becoming more part of it's becoming a place to be. But can you each speak to what it means to be at a university that's at the center of a thriving film, acting, and arts community? Professor LaVoy mentioned we're number two. We're number two for film, but you know.
We're number two, but LA doesn't count because LA is just going to always be Hollywood, and that's just what it is. So that's why I like to say we're really number one. Being number two in this case means number one. We're number one. What I can tell you about the sort of opportunities and interface, and I've only been at Emory for 2 years. I'm a newly minted Atlantan, and so we all know what's been happening for the last year. There's been a bit of a pause, which has actually been a wonderful time to sort of become personally integrated into the arts community here without the work part, just sort of meeting people and getting the lay of the land. And it truly is astonishing how much is happening in this city. And from a sort of theater, film, and television standpoint, what's really great for our students and what they benefit from tremendously is that our whole faculty works in this city. And, you know, we are out there having relationships with, you know, all the different theaters, all the casting directors, you know, whether it's the Marvel movies or Stranger Things or all of that, all of those experiences that are part of the culture, the work culture of this town, interface with our faculty constantly. And so when students have questions about, well, how do I do this? Or how do I get into this business? Or what's it like when you're auditioning for this? You don't have to Google it. You can actually knock on my office door. We can talk about it. Or I can say, oh, you know who was on that show last month? Caitlin, my colleague, you should go talk to her. But it's a very live, real, immediate experience that I think is available to our students because of the tremendous amount of business, you know, that is happening in this town right now. So from the theater, film, and the theater scene in Atlanta is it's just incredible. So and incredibly diverse. It's really actually, as a Black artist, to come here and work here with folks is a very different experience than I've had in places like Los Angeles or New York. And I think there's, like I said, this is a town that's fully engaged with its history in every way, and people are thinking about things differently. So it's tremendously exciting.
Yeah, I might bridge to something between what Professor LaVoy and Dr. Bhasin said a bit earlier about the city of Atlanta and its art scene. In particular, it is a scene, it's a city in which risk-taking and exploring together with others, collaborating, almost seems to be kind of like baked into the creative DNA of the city. And yet it's a city that is not, you know, like New York or like the theater scene in London. It's sort of like not so into what it is, that people and institutions become inaccessible and perhaps less open to risk-taking because of the fear probably of failing in your risk. And I think that this really does a lot for our Emory community as well. The connections between our faculty and the Atlanta arts community, and the connections not just in the sense of knowing people, right? But the connections of actually our faculty are crucial components of the Atlanta arts scene. The connections that our faculty have and just the openness of our Emory community to bringing in people who aren't tenured professors at other institutions to give lectures, but are practicing artists to come into our classrooms, to work with our students, to teach classes even in our curriculum so that our students are studying with practicing and in many cases emerging artists who are themselves trying to figure out their own practice and their own craft and how to make their own careers as artists. We found a lot of just amazing ways to build amazing experiences for our student and also our faculty communities by working through these connections, by bringing artists from the Atlanta community to campus, and reaching out as faculty members and as students on campus into the community. And I'd also say, along the lines of what Professor LaVoy was just saying, we are the second most film producing locale in the country. We are arguably, and people do argue about this quite a lot, arguably at the moment, the world capital of hip hop. And this is also an area in which we are really working to build some truly meaningful and lasting connections on the academic side, on the teaching side, on the creative side, with artists and producers throughout the city.
I'll just add to that and say it's fun for me, during this last year, I've had my share of moments here and there, stolen moments where I've turned on the television and saw, maybe a Netflix show or two. And it's fun to see my colleagues in the theater program at Emory in these shows on Netflix. But it's gotten to the point where I'm not super surprised anymore, because whether it's the Alliance Theater stage before this last year or now on these various serials and TV programs, people are making and creating here. And I'll just add, thinking about feedback from current and recent students, recently graduated, there's a special energy and magic to having a rehearsal in the morning with your teacher who's principal flute in the Atlanta Symphony, that's won 27 Grammy Awards. Then you have a biology seminar, you have an independent a study session with a faculty you're working closely with, and then after dinner, you go see your teacher perform the concerto that you yourself are working on at Orchestra Hall. That's something that is difficult to reproduce at other liberal arts research universities that don't have the geographic and the sort of creative, energetic advantages that Emory offers. And it's something that I know our students are just really taken by and excited about.
Yeah, absolutely. Dr. Bhasin, you're making me nostalgic for my days at Emory. I mean, he's telling the truth. That was a typical day, class, and then maybe ballet class, and then a meeting, with the student organization, and then another class, and then rehearsal, and then, seeing a performance in Atlanta. Like, truly, that is not a stretch. That is what a day looks like for an Emory student. And also, Dr. Bhasin brought up Netflix, and I have to plug this because it's really cool. If any of you have been watching Ginny and Georgia, one of the co-stars of that show, Antonia Gentry, she's an Emory alum, and she performed with the Rathskeller Improv Troupe while she was on campus. I watched every single one of her live performances there, and now look, she's one of the biggest stars on Netflix. So this is, and she was an Emory student. So it's really wonderful to hear all of that, and it's inspiring for me to hear all of that, even though I've been through it. But it's just great to see how it's evolved. And so I kind of want to change directions a little bit. And for me, an experience I had whilst I was at Emory, and specifically studying the arts at Emory, my background, I went to a ballet conservatory for high school. It was very strict ballet. Ballet is the only thing that matters. And there were always other parts of my being pulling on me. And then I came to Emory, started getting really involved with social justice work, with organizing, specifically around undocumented students. And it was my professors in the Emory dance faculty that really encouraged me to think about that part, not just letting these parts of me exist in silos, but thinking about how can, dance be a medium for social change. And I actually wrote my thesis on how movement can be a means for identity expression and communication. And I did a whole concert and stuff like in all of that. And so I kind of want to ask about you all about this intersection between social justice and the arts. And we'll start with Dr. Karns, so you can speak a little bit to the Emory Arts and Social Justice Fellows programs. And then I'd love to hear Professor LaVoy and Dr. Bhasin's thoughts on this topic as well.
Yeah, so last summer with the onset of the pandemic and watching the news unfold every day through just a series of conversations that I was having at that time with Professor Carlton Mackey of the Film and Media program. We came up with this idea to connect artists from the Atlanta community with our faculty, with the idea of having artists join classes all across the university in all kinds of fields. Some of them were arts classes, but we had courses in public health. We had a course in real estate law in the business school. We had a course in epigenetics from the biology department. We paired these artists from our community with Emory faculty members, embedded them within their classes, where the artists worked regularly with the students in the classroom, in the virtual classroom, of course, this past year, to develop creative projects that they all would help shape, that were designed to surface and to encourage and provide sort of open spaces for conversation about questions in which questions about the ways in which social inequity and social injustice structure so much of our conversation across all disciplines that we study, whatever disciplines they might be. Once a month, we gathered all the students, about 100 students in all these classes, all the faculty members and all the participating artists together, and had some extraordinary conversations where we had students on the Atlanta campus studying public health who were meeting students virtually on the Oxford campus in a gender studies classroom, talking about the kinds of questions they were raising and the kinds of ways in which they were negotiating those questions and trying to answer those questions for themselves within their own disciplines, and discovering that across the geographical space between the Atlanta campus and the Oxford campus, across the disciplinary space between public health and gender studies or real estate law, that some of these same fundamental questions were being raised and being wrestled with in this same moment. We had at the end of the semester an event hosted by President Fenves, where we had all the students and all the classes present their works that they created, the artistic works together that they created in partnership with their artists. And we're joined by community members, over 500 members of the greater Atlanta community joined the conversation. And it was just a deeply inspiring and really humbling experience for everyone involved in the program. The feedback that we got from our students was pretty inspiring in itself. We had students who had signed up back in the spring before anyone knew it was going to be happening in the fall, signed up for an epigenetics course, and were surprised to learn that Fahamu Peku, an absolutely amazing painter with an international following, was going to be a regular in their class. None of these students necessarily considered themselves to be artists, but through their engagement with Dr. Peku and the art that he was creating with them, they found this open space in which to work together and to surface problems and have discussions that they never imagined that they would. We're really happy that just today, actually, the application cycle for faculty and for artists for next year's Arts and Social Justice Fellows program went live. And we're going to be working in the coming weeks to connect with faculty and to identify the courses in which we'll be embedding artists in that same way.
Yes, and I've been told that my audio broke out for a second. I'm so sorry. Hopefully you were able to get the gist of what I was saying, but I just also wanted to ask Professor LaVoy and Dr. Bhasin to speak to this intersection between the arts and social justice and arts as a medium for social impacting a greater community, a greater society. One of my favorite questions, so I wanted to make sure you could hear me.
Sure, yeah. It's very interesting that you asked this today, because last week, so in addition to our theater studies department and Theater Emery, which is a professional theater company that is in residence at Emory, we have student theater clubs. We have, you mentioned the Rathskeller, which is improv. We have Dooley's Players. We have Ad Hoc, Emory Chinese Theater Company. We have just a lot of theater happening at Emory. It's kind of incredible. And so Dooley's Players, one of the student groups, produced an amazing play called Elephant's Graveyard, which they asked me to do a talk back with them afterwards after watching the play. This, of course, is Zoom theater. And I do just want to mention this because I'm so proud and sad about this fact. My students are doing better Zoom theater than my friends in New York. My students have leapt ahead in the evolution of a form that they were never supposed to have to master. And I'm just very, very proud of the work that they've been doing this year, because their attention to detail, their flexibility, their inventiveness, it's truly a testament to the level at which our students think and create. It's quite humbling. But in the talk back, we were discussing this sort of intersection of art and commerce, because it's a big part of this play, and sort of the harm that can be done in those spaces. And I put a challenge to my students, and I said, coming from the world of professional theater, both commercial and nonprofit, as much as I see people wrestling with this idea that has very much come to the forefront during this pandemic, is we don't pay our artists in society a living wage. What happens when a society doesn't pay its artists a living wage, and how do we confront that? How do we mend that? But more importantly, how do we innovate beyond it? And the folks who are engaged in making the art right now for audiences, they have a real tough time, because they are risk averse. There are expectations on them, and there are boards of directors that they have accountability to, and all sorts of factors at play. My challenge to my students was, here we are at the intersection. Here we are. I have double majors in business and theater studies. I have double majors in public policy folks, and I have finance people, and I have neurobiology. I have all sorts of people. And I said to my students, this is the closest you're ever going to be to people who think differently than you do. This is the incubator. Let's start talking and thinking now, today, about how to reinvent the model. It doesn't have to be $5 a month on Patreon. It can be something bigger, better, sturdier, more innovative. If it's gonna happen, it's gonna happen here. And they got really excited, and I got really excited. And then I started getting text messages from alums this week who had watched it and were like, well, how do we get involved in this thing? And I was like, well, I don't know what the thing is yet, but come back, we'll talk about it. But these are the spaces. This is the excitement. This is where real change can happen. And so that's where I'm focused right now in terms of that question of intersectionality.
I just thought I would share just an example of an upcoming project that we are looking forward to and anticipating in the University Symphony Orchestra. We are undertaking, starting next year, a 3-year commissioning project whereby we'll be commissioning new works by African-American women composers whose careers are perhaps emerging right now, 1 or 2 works a year, and we'll be leading towards a celebration in this commissioning project of the University Symphony Orchestra's 100th anniversary in 2023. And the goal of this is not just to bring great music to the stage and specifically celebrating voices that deserve to be celebrated, but also to show how a university performing ensemble, specifically a university one, can make a lasting contribution to the repertoire, to equity, to representation in our field that really needs our help. And we are poised to lend our efforts to this ongoing work that is happening all over the country. But specifically, I feel like, again, I'll go back to my comment about university patronage. We are nimble, we are responsive to these social and cultural questions. And I feel that Emory also helps us to use a considerable network of national and international resources to raise the profile of these projects so they sort of are in the imagination and sort of on people's minds very far from Atlanta and Georgia and the Southeast. And so part of that effort means bringing composers in, not just from America, but also perhaps from abroad. And that's something I'm very excited about. And that sort of celebrates both the longevity of what we do here at Emory, but also celebrates how Emory can be nimble in its goals and its missions to answer the call of important questions of the day.
Absolutely, absolutely. And as an alumna, it is just thrilling for me to get those communications from Emory, to see these projects, these initiatives, and it's amazing. This is actually one thing that really struck me as a student, and this conversation is only a testament to that, is that I feel like Emory as a university is willing to meet the moment. We're always willing to change. We're always willing to grow. We're a wonderful university, but we also accept how we can evolve to be the best university that we can. And that's just right here, right now, demonstrating that. And so we have had a few Q&A questions coming in. Thank you so much for your questions. And I see a couple people have asked about my dance background and the dance program at Emory. And so the first thing I'd say is, this is an amazing panel, but we don't have any dance faculty. So I'm the dance representative, but I'd encourage you to go to dance.emory.org or dance.emory.edu and get in touch with the dance faculty directly. I know that they'd be thrilled to answer any questions, and you'll kind of get a feel for the very, very robust offerings that Emory Dance has. Whilst I was a student, of course, I took classes in ballet, but I also took courses in modern and Kuchipudi, Indian classical dance form. And actually, I'll tell a quick story, and this kind of integrates into the other question, which someone asked about how dance now is incorporated into, my current career, which is not arts related. When I first moved here, and it was extremely overwhelming, it was quite the culture shock. And I had no idea what I was doing, and I just felt completely out of sorts. And then the second day I was here at the office where my organization works, the teacher was teaching a Bharatanatyam, which is another Indian classical dance form. And they're different, but there are also some similarities. And I immediately jumped in and joined in. And I had enough of a background that I could be a part of this. And I realized I just said to myself, like, thank goodness for dance, because here I am, able to connect with this community, to get my foot in the door, to have some credibility as a foreigner. And it's because of dance, and it's because of the arts. And I could talk so much about how movement and that background is such a powerful medium for communication, for connection. And so what I'd say to that is, if you are looking to come to a place like Emory and you want to study the arts in a serious, vigorous way, but you don't actually see the end game as a career, know that the time that you're spending in the classroom, in the studio, in the theater, in the orchestra, is going to serve you for the rest of your life, no matter what career you may take. And Professor LaVoy should speak more to that.
I want to endorse everything you're saying. And I know I don't teach dance. I'm an actor who moves well, but that's a technical term. But one of the things that comes up for a lot of arts students, performance students, is, this thing of university versus conservatory. Now, I ended up doing both. I did a full-on liberal arts undergraduate, and then I went to a training program to get my MFA. But one of the things that is really thrilling, and this is unique to a university with the resources and the reach and the philosophy of a place like Emory, is that if you are to come in, I think I can speak for dance because I know it's the same in theater studies, as a first-year student, and your interests develop in a certain way, by your fourth year, you can partner with faculty to create the kind of specialized experience that you want to have, be it between, dialogue and feedback with your advisors or your professors in the department. We can get people in to do a master class for something that you're specifically interested in. We can, again, we talk about flexibility and responsiveness, but that's truly what it is. But you have to have the reach, you have to have the scope, you have to have the resources, you have to have the faculty who can tap their friends who do that thing and say, hey, can you come to Atlanta for a weekend and teach this class for us? Or are you willing to mentor my student who does that thing? That is unique to this type of institution. And the students who take advantage of that, I think, have a truly extraordinary experience.
I'll just add one quick remark to that just sort of continues on that trajectory. I feel like more and more in my discussions I have with families and students who are considering Emory and looking for different great places to make their college careers, they're looking for an institution that doesn't require them to choose or to compromise on their love of performing, their desire to grow as a performer, but also their other academic interests, science, humanities. And I'll just echo what my colleagues are saying here, that Emory does it differently. There is a third path. There is a way to synchronize your interests and be amongst people, speaking for myself in the musical side of things, that are also at a high level like you, coming from National Youth Orchestra, Verbier, Interlochen, Tanglewood, etc. But they also want to simultaneously nourish another path in another field. And just like Professor LaVoy said, if you want the concertmaster of the ASO or the principal trumpet of the ASO to get you ready for that professional trade school sort of graduate path, graduate school when you're after your undergraduate, in that way, Emory is sort of similar, treating the performing arts similar to the way we treat law and medicine. We approach graduate school as a sort of professional trade, vocational experience, but you will be a better performer if that's the path you decide to take by getting a comprehensive liberal arts education. And more families, I think, are searching for that route that also doesn't require them to earn 2 degrees from 2 schools in their undergraduate. The School of Music, the College of Arts and Sciences. Those 2 schools don't necessarily, I'm just very proud of what we're able to do here at Emory, where we can offer a comprehensive education in both disciplines simultaneously within our College of Arts and Sciences. And it's something that just inspires me every day, and I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, and I would just add that, that this is something that, I would just add that this is something that departments think very deliberately about, that we really build our degrees to make them accessible to students who are also studying in other areas of the university, in other disciplines. And we're just getting short on time. The one other thing I'd add is it makes for stunning classroom conversations. If you take a trumpet player who's double majoring in classics, sit them next to a trumpet player who's double majoring in chemistry, sit them next to a trumpet player who's also getting a BBA. The conversations that you have among just in the trumpet section will be vastly different than the conversations you will have at a school of music with trumpet players all majoring in trumpet. It's really remarkable.
Yeah, absolutely. Amazing points by all 3 of you. And so to just to wrap it up a little bit, just sort of each of you, your 1-2 minute advice that you have for our admitted students and their families. So why don't we actually start with Dr. Karns, and then we'll go Dr. Bhasin and then Professor LaVoy.
I suppose what I would advise is that you reach out to faculty in the departments, in the areas of artistic practice and engagement that you're interested in, to learn about what they do as artists, to learn about their teaching. And it's not too early to start making connections, which could prove to be profoundly meaningful when you arrive on campus in the fall.
I'll just echo that and say that my contact information as a sort of point of reference for the instrumental music performance side of things, but also with my connections with my vocal, choral, jazz, non-Western music, piano colleagues, please reach out to me. And if you have questions and issues or just any concerns whatsoever, consider me and all of my colleagues available to get into those conversations with you anytime.
Sorry, I was just adding my email to the chat. Please do feel free to reach out to me, any questions that you might have about the Theater Studies Department in general. The bit of advice that I would give at this point in the journey is just to say, when and if we see you on campus. There's been a lot of very focused, what I call box checking, that gets a student from tiny person to undergraduate study. And what I always encourage my students to do is to just think wide, think broad, blow your own mind about what you think you want to do when you arrive at Emory, because I promise you, the world really is your oyster. There is so much to do. Take classes that you don't even understand what they're about. There's so much here, and it's such a thrilling time, and there's really nothing like it. So even if you think you know what it is you want to do, be sure and challenge that notion, because you'll meet people and you'll have conversations, and you'll find that there's more there than you even thought there was.
Yes, absolutely. And I guess I can also give a little bit of advice as someone who was most recently in your shoes. The first thing I would say is that when Dr. Karnes, Professor LaVoy, and Dr. Bhasin are sharing their emails and saying reach out, they truly mean it. Emory is a place where faculty, staff, administration, and of course students are so warm and genuinely willing to engage with you. So please do reach out, and I know they'll be happy to have those conversations with you. And then just kind of on a more philosophical note, I would say that I would encourage the students to lean into your passions and lean into who you are. If you want to study music or acting or dance and people are asking you, but what are you going to do with that? Why would you do that? Are don't mute that noise and lean into what authentically feels right to you, what you feel purpose in, you feel drive in, what you feel the fire, and the rest, the path will illuminate. You'll find your way, and there'll be people like those on the screen to help guide you there. So with that, I think that I'm going to conclude this session. Thank you so much to the admitted students, your families, the greater community for tuning in today. And thank you so much to Dr. Karnes, Professor LaVoy, and Dr. Bhasin for just an absolutely inspiring, illuminating conversation. It was such an honor to be with you all today. And I hope that one day we can all be on campus together in some capacity. So appreciation, gratitude, and blessings to all of you. So thank you so much.